I have long wished that I was in the prime of my career during the dot-com boom of the 90s or the smartphone era of the late 2000s because it felt like everybody was making money hand over fist. Probably not true, but at least that's how it feels. So now that I'm at a level of competency as an engineer and approaching a level of wealth as an individual, that I can start to really seize these opportunities as an entrepreneur and investor as they come up. I've had my eyes glued on the horizon, trying to see what that next big platform shift is that emerges. And it feels like we're due for one. Like every 10 to 15 years, we have these big computing cycles. In 1950s and 60s, we had mainframe computers. In the 1970s, we had mini computers. 80s, we had PCs. 90s, we had the internet. 2007, the iPhone came out, and it's been the smartphone era ever since. And now that it's 2024, we have a few candidates for what might be coming next. I think chief among them, the horse that most people would bet on, is AR and VR. Might be the one that I would bet on as well, until very recently, where I started to give blockchain another look, Web 3.0 specifically. Used to always dismiss it, used to always wave it away and agree with the skeptics, and you might have felt the same way. But what was really missing for me was the so what. Why does this matter? Why is Web 3.0 any big improvement on Web 2.0? And what is it even really? The analogy that most people are usually going to give you, and you've probably heard it 100 times, so I'll try to recap it quickly, is that Web 1.0 was read-only. So the internet was essentially just a mishmash of websites that were just serving static content, content that you could consume but not interact with. Think job listings, think business directories like yahoo.com, think restaurant menus, that kind of thing. And then Web 2.0 came along, and that's the era that we're living through right now. An era which is read-write. So not only can you consume content, but actually most of the value is in the content that you and other users create, at least in the most valuable websites, the most valuable networks. So think of things like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, that sort of thing. And the next evolution, what people believe to be the next evolution, is Web 3.0, blockchain enabled, which is read, write, own. So not only can you consume content and create content, you can also own your digital identity and digital assets and maybe even the platform itself, which all sounds very exciting. It all sounds pretty appealing, but I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if you know what that looks like. It certainly isn't very visual or intuitive, and it doesn't really explain why that's much better than the situation we have going for ourselves right now with Web 2.0. What opened my eyes, though, was a book called Read, Write, Own by Chris Dixon that came out recently. He's a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, and in recent funds, they've been largely focused on Web 3.0, so it's not exactly an unbiased account, but it was eye-opening nonetheless, and it solidified a lot of things in my brain and gave me some intuition that I would like to share with you today, because I think if this is the next platform shift, it has the potential to make a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of investors a whole lot of money. But the first concept that we all need to understand is something called take rates. You are probably a user of some of these big networks like Instagram and Twitter. I am as well. And as a user, you are really what's creating the value, what's driving attention to the platform. You and other users, you come there to consume each other's content. And the corporate entities that own these networks, so let's say X, ByteDance, Meta, Googles of the world, the way that they make money is usually by slapping advertisements in and around your content. And the percentage of the revenue that flows through their network that they keep for themselves versus what they pass on to you, the creator, is what's called their take rate. And YouTube is by far the most generous out of all of them. They have a take rate of 45%, leaving 55% for the creators. That's the gold standard right now out of all the platforms that we typically use day to day, but it's the exception and certainly not the rule. What's much more typical is what you're going to be seeing out of Meta and X and ByteDance. You're going to be seeing take rates closer to 99%, if not more, where you leave a penny on the dollar for creators. And as the people that are driving all the value, driving all the attention to these networks, that doesn't exactly feel fair, does it? But the reason that they can do that is because most networks look like this. Groundbreaking diagram, I know. It's a social graph where you are part of it, you are a node in the network, and you are connected to other nodes. I'm showing only your own connections here for brevity and clarity, but obviously everyone else has their own. And the issue with this is that you don't control any of it, right? You kind of control your content. These networks might respect your wishes. If you want to delete your content, they will no longer serve it. They might even let you export your content, or hopefully you have it saved locally on your phone or your computer, and that gives you a tiny bit of downside protection. If you're a TikTok creator and TikTok gets greedy, or they change their algorithm on you, or they shadow ban you for whatever reason, they are not making it a valuable space for you to be on anymore. What you can do is you can take your TikToks, you can export those videos, you can put them on YouTube as shorts, or you can put them on Instagram as reels, and that is an option you have, but it's the nuclear option, isn't it? Because your audience isn't on those platforms, and you certainly don't want to start from scratch, and they know that, which is why they squeeze you accordingly. They extract as much value as possible, because they can. But imagine instead a situation where you own your digital identity. And because everybody owns their digital identities, that means you can also own your connections. And this might be a little bit confusing, but there's actually precedent for this. We actually have an example for this in the shape of protocol networks like SMTP, or email rather, to be a bit more simplistic. You sort of own your own email address, and so does everybody else, which means that you own your connections to other people. You own your email list if you are a newsletter creator, and that gives you an enormous amount of leverage. That is why services built on top of email, like Substack, like MailChimp, like SendGrid, like Beehive, they have very low take rates. I think Substack, don't quote me on this, probably has the best business model out of all of them, might be the most lucrative one at the moment. They have a take rate of 10%, which is so much lower than YouTube's 45%, which is right now the gold standard among those big platforms. Pretty great, right? And you get that because the switching costs are so low. Not because Substack is doing it out of the goodness of their heart, but because they recognize that if they get greedy, you can take your email address, the same one you signed up on Substack with, sign up with it on MailChimp, take your email list, put it there, and you and your audience are no worse off for it. The only person who's worse off for it is Substack. I'm using Substack as an example here. I personally love it. I have one. So yeah, just an example. And that's the leverage that you get from owning your identity and your connections. But imagine a situation where you also own part of the network itself. That's where things get really, really interesting. Because one of the sharpest tools in a founder's toolkit in startup land, a land that I know everyone watching this is probably very familiar with, is equity, i.e. ownership. You can't compete on dollars with big tech. You can't pay somebody more than what they might be able to get from Google, but you can offer them more ownership than Google will. And what that means is that if you play your cards right, if you execute well on your vision, and so does your team, and you picked a good idea, then that equity could end up being worth more to those early employees than any pay package from Google, Meta, and any other big tech firm could possibly provide. And that's huge. The issue is that there is no comparable incentive for early users, and there needs to be, because in the early stages, these networks are the worst that they're ever going to be. If you were a new user of Reddit in the early days, why bother posting? Why bother writing a good post or writing a post at all when nobody's going to read it? If you were one of the first users of Uber, why book a ride if the closest one is 50 hours away? You know, it's just not really incentivizing you to participate. And as well, you don't know if these platforms are going to survive and thrive over the long term. So all of these networks suffer from what's called the cold start problem. When you're starting from zero, it's really hard to reach a critical mass of users where the network is actually truly useful on its own merits and people want to join. So what do we do about that? That's where token incentives come in. Very similar to how you offer equity to early employees, you can offer tokens, which are the currency of your network, to early employees. In the early stages, let's call this line the size of the network. The network's not very valuable to users, which is why the incentives need to be high. Same way you pay your earliest employees the largest equity grants. But then, as the platform gets larger and more valuable and more useful on its own merits, and you've de-risked it, then you taper off your incentives. And there's no need to provide as many to the later users that join. And this is awesome because the same way that early employees work harder, work longer, work more creatively, work more excitedly, because they know that incremental effort might mean incremental value whenever they get to cash out their equity. Similarly, early users that have earned a lot of tokens in the early stage for participation are going to be evangelists for your product. They're going to bring other people online. They're going to really spread the word. They're going to provide you with feedback. They might even roll up their sleeves, get their hands dirty, and help you build the platform yourself, which is a really cool world that I don't think there's much precedent for. If there's any other examples like that, please let me know in the comments. But that's why digital ownership matters. And at a time where everybody's talking about AI, no one's really talking about how Bitcoin reached $70,000, a new high, a few weeks ago. And it's probably going to continue to climb. And experts are saying that the infrastructure behind blockchain is getting so good that the application developers don't really need to think about the infrastructure anymore when they're developing apps, which is a key moment in most computing cycles. And that leads to a virtuous cycle called the platform app effect, where as the infrastructure improves, people invest more into building apps, and as people build more apps, people invest more into infrastructure. And it's a virtuous cycle that can really help things take off quickly. And experts, yes, biased experts like this, but also others, believe that this is starting to happen. And I know it's not intuitive. I know it's not as sexy as AI. I know it's not as visual. Most people understand AI. It's been the subject of science fiction for a very long time. We all know the potential. This is hard to get, but that's exactly the point, because it could be an excellent arbitrage opportunity. If this is the next platform shift, then it is going to be an enormous opportunity for the entrepreneurs and the investors who understand it, and potentially a very large threat for those that don't. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening. Please give this a like if this is something that you enjoyed. I'm desperate for your validation. I'm just starting to do this. And please let me know what you think about this. Is this bull? Is it great? Let me know. And given that this is my first video, I would also love some feedback on if this is the right format and the right way to broach these topics. I do like to be analog with the whiteboards, but if that doesn't suit y'all, that would be good to know too. But until next time.